Well, welcome to Win TV. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer. And can you believe it? It's been almost 3 years since we first started our broadcast on Win TV. This is our 51st episode of the second season of our digital broadcast program. And we're so glad that you continue to join us each week or watch us over the weekend, but we are just so glad that you're joining us. And we try or strive our hardest here to bring you news that matters. Today's show is no different, and I look forward to jumping into that to tell you what our program includes today. In the meantime, I hope you've had a chance to pick up a copy of this week's Washington Informer. Excuse me. Chevy shows it on the screen, and I like to show the real deal. And we are so excited. If you can see this young lady right here on both papers, she is the top speller in Prince George's County. Her name is Noemi, and Noemi Jackson Weaver won the Prince George's County Spelling Bee, sponsored by the Washington Informer, last Friday evening at the Clarice Smith Center at the University of Maryland. There were 18 young spellers who participated in that Prince George's County-wide spelling bee, and Naomi will be representing Prince George's County at the Scripps National Spelling Bee later in the month of May, Memorial Day weekend, which will be held once again, but this time live, thank goodness, at the National Harbor at the Gaylord Hotel. And so we are going to be really excited to see Naomi, and keep your ears tuned for the winner of the DC Spelling Bee, the Washington Informer's DC Citywide Spelling Bee. That bee took place, but I can't tell you who the winner is. But that bee will be aired on April the 10th on the Officer Cable Television's channel, and we'll give you the details of that bee as well. So we have two winners going to the Scripps National Spelling Bee. Should be a great event. And I am so excited that young people in this city still believe that it's important to read and to learn how to spell. And they were some difficult words there, Sherry. I'm gonna tell you, we might play Spelling Bee on Win TV just to see how our viewers do in spelling some of these words that these young people are accustomed to. They read a lot. They speak several languages. They've traveled. All those things, I think, help to sort of, broaden anybody's perspective and knowledge base. I don't care how young or how old you are. It makes a difference. So if you're watching on Facebook, we certainly do want you to go ahead and hit share so that your followers can see this broadcast. And if you're watching on Twitter, be sure to follow us and we'll follow you back. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Washington Informer TV. That's one word, Washington Informer TV, all together. We are 6 days into spring, of course, and the temperatures have been fluctuating so much, going up and down. And one day we have to wear a heavy jacket. The next day we can go out with maybe something in less than a sweater. I've seen some folks out there, though, I think a little extreme, tank tops and shorts and flip-flops. I don't think we're there yet. But if that's you, do your thing, as they say. But we're still in the early days of spring. The cherry blossoms, I think, were at full bloom either yesterday or today. And if you hadn't had a chance to go down and see them, they're beautiful as always. And we're certainly looking forward to the annual Cherry Blossom Festival parade that will be coming up, and it will be live this year. Glad that it looks like this pandemic is almost done. But despite all of these events now that we're beginning to go back to, please don't let your guard down. And if you feel more comfortable wearing your mask, do it. Wear the mask. You are the captain of your ship, and you have to keep your own self safe. And we hope that as we hear about subvariants of all of these, of the Omicron variant, and you got the Omicron variant, now you got a subvariant, and in places across the world, people, particularly in Europe, they are seeing a rise in cases of COVID. So, we cannot let our guard down. So I hope that you will continue to stay safe. Welcome, Vera Abbott. So glad to see you on our show today. What a way to close out Women's History Month as we watched the confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson this week, the first Black woman nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court. It was definitely a historic moment. I think there's a lot that people have to say about what happened this week in the qualifications and predictions about whether she will, in fact, be confirmed. So far, it's been pretty positive, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. We're continuing to celebrate our Women's History Month and the accomplishments of Black women. And joining us today is Rosie Allen-Herring, President and CEO of United Way of the National Capital Area. United Way is still the largest nonprofit organization in the United States. And so for Rosie Allen-Herring to be at the helm here in the National Capital Area, it's fantastic, especially with her coming on to announce her education series, recently hosting the impact on the pandemic on women in the workforce. So we'll talk to her a little bit more about that. We're also happy to have with us Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy, who's going to talk to us, as I said, about the confirmation hearing of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And last but not least, we will be speaking to husband and wife, or definitely wife, Jacqueline and Cassius Priestley, who recently participated in a briefing at the White House with Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marsha Fudge and Domestic Policy Advisor Susan Rice. And the Priestleys will talk about their experience with housing appraisals, their own housing appraisal, and in Prince George's County, and how the President Biden and HUD are trying to resolve so many of the issues that still impact people of color when it comes to home ownership. So first, before we get into our program, here's WIN TV News broadcast from journalist Curtis Knowles.
This is WIN TV News, bringing you the news that matters. D.C. Attorney General Karl A. Racine filed a lawsuit on Monday against the food delivery company Grubhub for charging hidden fees and using deceptive marketing tactics during the apex of the coronavirus pandemic to increase profits at the expense of consumers and local small businesses. Racine has said consumers don't mind paying for delivery fees, but Grubhub needs to be honest about these fees in the first place. With this lawsuit, we are seeking to force Grubhub to end its unlawful practice and be transparent so that DC residents can make informed decisions about where to order food and how to support local businesses. Grubhub has responded saying that they will aggressively defend their business in court. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said an official from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow found U.S. basketball player Brittany Griner to be in, quote, good condition after they were recently granted consular access to the American athlete who is being detained in Russia. The embassy's official was granted consular access to Griner on Tuesday, the first official government access given to Griner since she had been detained by Russia since mid-February. Griner, a two-time Olympic gold medalist and player for the WNBA's Phoenix Mercury team, was arrested in February at a Moscow airport and accused by Russian authorities of smuggling significant amounts of narcotic substances. News of Griner's condition comes after Moscow court announced it extended the arrest of Griner until May 19th. Stefan Wilhite, the creator of the looping animated image format, the GIF, died earlier this month. He was 74. In 1987, while working at CompuServe, he created the graphics interchange format, or GIF known as GIF, in order to compress images to make them accessible for early modern speeds. Years later, it became social media's primary method of conveying emotion and mimetic communication. In 2013, Wilhite went on to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 17th Annual Webby Awards for his invention and contribution to internet culture. A funeral service was held for Wilhite in Milford, Ohio on Tuesday. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright has passed away. She was 84. Albright was the first woman to serve as the U.S. Secretary of State. Albright died of cancer, her family said, adding that she was surrounded by her friends and family at the time. Albright served her post for 4 years, actively promoting the expansion of NATO. Then President Bill Clinton named Albright the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations shortly after he was inaugurated in 1993, and shortly after nominated her as Secretary of State 3 years later. President Joe Biden remembered Albright, saying, "She was a force of goodness, grace, and decency, and for freedom." This is Curtis Knowles with WIN TV News.
Thank you so very much, Curtis. We're going to move on now because I'm really excited to bring on Rosie Allen-Herring to the show. But before we do that, Sherry just reminded me we have a little quick video we want to share with you, and then we can get into our interview.
When we all practice equity, All are fed and full. All are insured and healthy. All are trusted, and the only color of money is green. All are warm and sheltered. All are educated and enlightened. All are seen and heard. When everyone begins to practice equity is when equality starts to take hold. Join us. It's what we do with boots on the ground and love in our hearts. Give, volunteer, and lend your influence to the United Way of the National Capital Area. When none are ignored, all will thrive.
So Rosie, we probably should end there because then maybe people start writing their checks and then we can you can go home and feel as though mission was accomplished. But how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me. And it's really a pleasure to be with you and all your viewers and listeners.
Thank you so very much. You know, I don't think we last talked until probably right in the beginning of the pandemic. And of course, what this meant for United Way. And I'm sure that, you know, that's been a harrowing experience for you and your nonprofits, but also, you know, what you've done, what's evolved out of that. A lot of good things have come out of that. So maybe you can share some of that with us.
Sure. Well, you know, I think to your point, none of us saw COVID coming, and we didn't see the pandemic coming. And once we found ourselves in the moment, no one could have anticipated that it would last as long as it has. But I think it has brought some disparities to light, where many of the needs that were already there, Denise, were simply exacerbated. And I think that it's also given us an opportunity to look much more critically as to how we deliver those services and how do we expand those services, because now even more of our neighbors and families found themselves in need. So yes, you're correct. The pandemic has simply brought to light some of the issues that were literally already there.
I know we're here to talk. So the feedback there, Sherry. We're here to talk about the Changemakers education series. But I'm just curious too, as it relates to the nonprofits that are members of United Way, because we talk about small businesses, we talk about the closure of small businesses, the loss. What's been the experience on the nonprofit side? Have they been able to survive this, or have you seen some of them have to close their doors as well?
We've seen both. We've seen, you know, some who were small, but you know what you found is many of the donors, the donor base for some shrank, because so many people found themselves in need who traditionally could have been donors, especially when it comes to the economic part of the pandemic. And then you've seen others to thrive, like food banks and things of that nature, because they've gotten the attention that food insecurity was one of the first things that became an issue when we found ourselves in the crisis. It was followed by, you know, it was really there because of the education component, because we realized that so many of our children, the only nutritious meal they were receiving was when they were in school. And when they weren't in school, we found out that many of those families were very much, you know, food insecure. And so what you see are those issues that rise to the top, where it's a huge conglomerate of need. They got the attention, and they continue to get the attention because so many families are certainly in need. And that's everything from the food insecurity to the distance learning and all of the supports that are there, getting all of the Chromebooks to all of the public schools, you know, children. And then once they had the technology, you found out, oh, it doesn't do us any good to have the Chromebook if you don't have connectivity. And then you had to learn, you know, that many families, the digital divide is real. And so it's just a matter of recognizing we've had to follow the need, we've had to evolve, and it requires us to still do that. We're in a constant state of looking at what not a new normal will be, but what a better normal is going to be.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad that there is, you know, some focus and analysis of that, because, you know, communities don't always express what their needs are until there's almost a crisis. And that's where we were during the pandemic. The Changemakers education series, you know, did that come out of what you all also observed? or is this a special initiative? Tell us about that.
Well, it's been something that's we've had ongoing in terms of just having the series of having these thoughtful conversations, if you will. This particular Changemaker series, to your point, and I'm thanking you so much for highlighting it, launched March 14th. So we're just sort of kind of 2 weeks in, and it's really the first of 10 sessions that we're going to have, and convening thought leaders around some thoughtful conversations on trends that are happening here in the National Capital Region, but also bringing solutions to some of those toughest challenges and bringing some equity solutions to the table as well. And we're really looking at the intersectionality, if you will, of gender and race and equity and, program design, effectiveness, the impact of COVID, so on and so forth. So mental health, you name it, we're going to be talking about all of those things over the course of the next 10 months.
And so give me an example, Rosie, of maybe one or two of those topics you're talking about, and how and who will be sort of the experts, I guess, in these conversations.
Sure. Well, the first session that we just had that kicked off on March 14th, because of course it is Women's History Month, and I love the fact that you noted how we're ending the month with hopefully the confirmation of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. But the first one that we talked about was women in the workplace. Back in June of 2021, McKinsey did a study that talked about the exodus of women from the workplace, primarily due to the pandemic. And it really highlighted so much of the backbone that women have in the workplace, but also who was disproportionately impacted by the workplace, decisions that have to be made for many families, because women have traditionally been seen as the primary caregivers in the home. And so in that conversation, we had, a woman who had been in the workforce, had lost her husband, had the means to not have to go back into the workforce, but saw other women who didn't have that opportunity, and was able to sort of kind of highlight, how do we garner that strength that they have and that know-how that they have, and not lose that genius. We also had Jennifer Porter, who leads the mayor's office on women's policy, who was able to talk about what it has meant for the District of Columbia and what it's meant in this region around women in the workplace, and what the exodus of that genius, what that looks like, and who's been impacted more so around it. So it's really been a big trend. But again, that was the first that we kicked off in the Changemaker series.
Is the series primarily focused on women?
No, the series will have different topics. So we will deal with everything from mental health. We'll deal with advancing equity. We'll look at it from a racial lens, from an economic lens. We will deal with gender and equity and what happens there for women versus men. So I think that because we are very women-centric, and being the first female CEO at Your United Way, we can't forget what it means in our society for why women are so important. And so we don't believe it should be limited to simply 1 month, any different than we believe that Black history should be limited to 1 month as well. We really want to talk about it so we're as inclusive as possible in recognizing what these trends mean to our community at large. So yes, it'll be an ongoing conversation.
And how do you anticipate the impact of this? What is the end result? Are we looking at maybe addressing some public policy issues, empowering women to know where the resources are? What is the end game here?
Absolutely, all of the above. We definitely want to bring attention, because you'd be amazed, Denise, at how many people didn't realize that women were such a part of the workforce. And in the last 24 months or so, as we've gone through COVID, it had not come to the forefront that women were the ones, quote unquote, being forced to leave the workforce. And now, as we're returning to the office, not returning to work, because for many of us, we've been working all along, but when we talk about what it means to return to the office and how we have to now evolve and look at what we're looking and how we're making the criteria for what the return to the office looks like. Is it a hybrid fashion? What about people who have small kids that are still doing distance learning? What about if you are caring for a parent, if you will, if you have other significant challenges that prevent it being, quote unquote, just as it was before? So I think it's challenged us to think about, what are the solutions for return to the office? How do we meet our workforce where they are? How do we look at effectiveness and efficiencies in a much different manner? And as employers, how do we ensure that we compete for talent and meet people where they are in terms of being able to get that genius in our respective organizations and businesses.
Yeah, I just and as you say this, it makes me think about all the scenarios that you just painted as it relates to women in the workforce,
Mhm.
and whether they're in person or remote. But it seems as though if it's a remote situation, it almost devalues. It could almost devalue sort of the input that women give because they're not there, they're not present, they're not seen, they're not at the table. Unlike men who just assume to be, have those positions and that power. How does
Yeah.
that impact? What I mean, I'm sure there's somebody at home thinking, do I go back to work? If I can work from home, would it be better for me to work from home? And what does that mean for me in the long term?
I think that there are a couple of different things. It certainly depends on the individual and their specific circumstance. But I think you should be able to do whatever it is that you want to do. Meaning that if it's better for you to remain home, then you should be able to make the case because generally, most employers want you to be able to bring your genius to work and they shouldn't care about how they get it. And if it's more important for just to have someone in the office, but their mind is somewhere else, you're not getting their best anyway. And so I think it's incumbent upon us not to look at things in such a formalized fashion, meaning that, core hours will likely change. I have to admit, coming back into the office a couple of times, Denise, in the commute, I have to get my commuter muscle back because it's now something I hadn't done. And so it's a matter of thinking, how do we look at capturing the best of our people who, if they have to leave the workforce, they don't leave their brains on the floor. They still take them with them. And why can't we access that genius? Why can't we access that expertise and know-how? And if it means that we have to look at things a little bit different than we have traditionally, then I think we're going to have to do that. To compete for talent, we're going to have to offer a lot of flexibility, and we're going to have to look at things with a new lens, how we recruit, and not make judgments. If you see a space in someone's resume that they've been out of the workforce for a period of time, you don't make a judgment. You deal with the person who's sitting in front of you, making his or her case as to why they're the best person for their job. You have to figure out, as an employer, as an organization, how do you simply meet people where they are so that they can bring their best to you? And it won't be necessarily 100% in the office. It won't be 9 to 5. Sometimes it'll be 5 to 10 p.m. or what have you, and when people can bring their best to it. But if you were serious about the work getting done, then we should become less stringent about how it's getting done.
You just sounded like you've been eavesdropping on our conversations here at the Informer as we look at how we get stuff done. I mean, I could go on with this because I think it's really great. One question though I have, because I'm also at that point and know a lot of folks that are, these people who have retired from the workforce and they're still what we now perceive as still fairly young. They're maybe in their late 50s, early 60s, and at some point want to get back into the workforce. Is that a part of any of your conversations as well? And then lastly, just kind of tell me or tell us how people can participate in these conversations.
Sure. I will say, anyone who has something to offer should be valued in society, no matter where they are on the age spectrum. I think that when you look at many of our seniors, if you will, that may be out of the workforce in a formalized or in a day-to-day fashion, still have something to offer. And so I think we can meet them. Sometimes it could be on a part-time basis, because again, the genius is still there. The expertise is still there. I think you can sometimes engage it in a volunteer manner, because for some, if it's not a matter of really truly being in the workforce, but they simply want to have something to do and they have something to offer, we find a way to meet them on that spectrum. And so volunteerism is huge. And again, part-time is an option as well for those who simply still want to be in the workforce. So I think that there are a myriad of ways that you can meet people where they are and be able to access and appreciate all that they bring to the table.
Sorry about that. And assuming that employers understand that as well, I think it's a good deal. How can people become engaged with the education series? Is there something go to the website? How does it work?
They can absolutely go to our website, which is United Way NCA for National Capital Area.org. I see the Facebook, IG, and Twitter handles that are there for any of your readers and listeners to see. But it's also just sometimes calling us and finding out, not only what's happening for the Changemaker series, but there are myriad of things that they can engage with your United Way on. It's volunteer efforts with kit packing to help those who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness. It's, being able to volunteer with many of our education initiatives, to be able to go to our financial empowerment centers. We have 5 across this region that your readers and listeners can have access to. And even if it's not something they have to offer, but a particular need that they may have that needs to be met, we stand ready to do our best to offer a solution to our neighbors in need as well. So it's a two-way street, if you will. Certainly we want our donors to help us to do even more because the need is greater. And we have finite resources for infinite needs, but it's also for them to be able to engage us if they have needs, but also if they have resources and if simply they have time.
Wonderful. Well, Rosie Allen-Herring, thank you so very much for joining us and for sharing all the updates on what you all are doing over at United Way. It's good that you're still here supporting the community and supporting nonprofits. And we're in the midst of a campaign right now, aren't we?
Well, we're always in the midst of a campaign at Your United Way. It's a 24-hour, 365-day effort. And so, anytime that donors want to reach out to us, they certainly can. And I will say this, one of the things that we've really come to evolve is being a part of community and caring does not mean you have to be a millionaire. Everyone can simply do something. And so for any of your readers and or listeners, and Washington Informer is such an institution. I adored, having been a Washingtonian for a little bit of time now from being a student at Howard University. Your readers and listeners have done so much, and they continue to do that partnership with us. So whatever you decide to do and how much you can tend to offer will certainly be appreciated, but we promise, more importantly, to be a good steward of what's been entrusted to us so that you can believe and trust that the work is being done and that whatever contribution you choose to make is going to good use. So again, sometimes it's time and treasure that we value as well. So we're simply grateful for you, Denise Warlock-Barnes, and your phenomenal leadership and that of your entire Washington Informer team for just being our partners on this journey.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being with us today. And we'll be following up again soon.
Absolutely.
All righty. Thank you so much. We want to bring on now State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy, who's been waiting in the wings, and we certainly do want to talk to her. Are you? You can hear me, and I assume I can hear you.
Yes, it's great to see you, Denise.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, we've been watching these hearings this week, and we wanted to bring you on because, I'm sure you have, who has walked down that path. You're an attorney, a Black woman. There are a lot of things that you identify with as it relates to the confirmation hearing of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And so I just want to kind of get that first sort of reaction from you. If you've been watching the hearings, or even when you heard the news that she was going to be nominated.
Well, first of all, when I found out that Judge Brown Jackson was going to be nominated, I was so overwhelmed and overjoyed. We knew that there were so many qualified Black women who were ready to lead our nation on the highest court in the land. And so to know that we were going to be in capable hands, I thought was phenomenal. But to know that there was going to be finally representation of our perspective, our history, just our viewpoint on the bench just meant so much because we are a diverse nation. We carry with us, though, a history that is rooted in a lot of pain, a lot of resilience, and a lot of firsts. Because we had been denied so much, now we're seeing a lot of firsts, like the first Black woman to be a vice president, and now the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. I'm very prideful. I have a lot of pride at this time in our history, and I'm so grateful to be able to witness this amazing woman who will arguably be the most qualified and prepared justice to ever be nominated and in the short future confirmed to the Supreme Court. So it's I don't want to get emotional, but I have a whole lot of pride in that. But sitting through and watching the hearings, I'm not surprised that her judgment is being attacked, her perspective, her decisions are being challenged by people, quite frankly, who really don't understand the law, who don't understand.
Even though, if I can interrupt you one
Yeah,
second, it's
sure,
interesting that she even had to do that lesson, that the laws that she's upholding are the laws that are created by the Congress, right? And
correct.
so if they don't understand how that's applied, it makes you question what they've been doing all these years. Where do they think their laws go?
Yeah, but what I believe, Denise, is that they understand that they create the laws. What they are not prepared for or ready for is a Black woman interpreting them
Mm.
and making her decisions based on her perspective and her discretion, making her decisions based on the law. And so I think that is the issue. It is not that there are a set of laws. Everyone understands that, and Congress well knows their responsibility and their role in creating those laws. But what they are not completely prepared for, at least some of them, is a Black woman making decisions. And I think that intimidates many of them, but just get ready because here she comes.
And on the other end, well, first of all, do you believe that she will be confirmed?
Absolutely. I believe that she will be confirmed. I think everyone knows that. I think there's a lot of political grandstanding. I think a lot of people are looking to get sound bites, and they are getting sound bites in, but I don't think it'll impact the outcome. I think she will be our next Supreme Court justice.
And we've had two African Americans on the Supreme Court so far, Justice Thurgood Marshall and now Justice Clarence Thomas. Two sides of a coin, right? And so we wonder, and we can credit Justice Marshall with so many landmark decisions that really did impact all Americans, but particularly African Americans. What difference do you think having a Black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court? What difference do you think that will make, or the impact?
Well, I look at her not only as a Black woman, but someone who has, just decades of experience as a judge, which is something that is new. Right now, we have justices on the bench who certainly have experience, but none have come with as much experience before reaching the Supreme Court than Justice Brown Jackson. So she's going to bring with her just the ability to write opinions and write lengthy opinions and be very thoughtful when she is writing on behalf of the majority of the court. And even in her dissents, which I think, if she's in a position to dissent from the majority of the judges, I think she will be very thoughtful and very careful and deliberative when writing her dissent. So I think what you're going to find from her is someone who will really bring a breadth of knowledge and an experience to the function of being a judge. And I think that is absolutely critical. She is also the very first public defender to ever be elevated to the highest court in the land. And I think that is so powerful because our public defenders represent those who don't have the ability or cannot pay or afford private representation. So oftentimes we're talking about those who are unemployed, underemployed, and who need help, who need assistance. So having a justice who have actually worked with individuals who are those in our society who we consider maybe the least of these in terms of their ability to attain resources, bringing that perspective also to the bench, I think, is extremely important, not just when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to economics and parity and everything else that unfortunately leads to this disparity in income. So I really think that she's going to bring just a different type of perspective based on her experiences in the legal profession to the bench.
And on that note, Attorney Braveboy, it seems as though you have actually been scrutinized yourself for employing or having an ex-offender working in your building, and I
In
mean,
my office. In
in
my
your
office.
office, exactly.
Correct.
Okay, so talk about that. I mean, what's the issue?
There's no issue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
We hire qualified people here in Prince George's County. We lead by example. This individual paid his debt to society. He was a juvenile lifer. He was 16 years old when he committed his crime, and it was a terrible crime. But he spent 29 years in prison. And while there, he obtained his GED. He obtained skills so that he could perform work while he was in prison. He even started a mentoring program for other prisoners who needed help and guidance as they transition, unfortunately, in to the prison, so that they would not get in trouble and so that they could really have hope. And so when I started reviewing sentences of people who we believe were disproportionately sentenced, including these juvenile lifers, which the Supreme Court has said that sentencing juveniles to life is cruel and unusual punishment, right? But we had done that here in the state of Maryland. 82% of whom are Black. Our juvenile lifers, 82% of them who are sentenced to life are Black. And so we started reviewing those cases. His was one of the first we reviewed, and made a decision that he had paid his debt, that he was fully rehabilitated and reformed, and he deserved a second chance, and he is thriving. And since he has been released, we have released dozens more, and we have dozens more in the works. And, I think it's just about bringing, again, the right perspective to the criminal justice system, using your discretion and your power in any seat that you're in any position that you're in, to do justice. And while we think of justice as prosecution, which it clearly is in many cases, and we seek justice for our victims, we seek appropriate sentences, the justice system does not end after someone is sentenced. There are post-trial motions that can be filed, and my office will look at those in a way that is fair and that takes into consideration all of the circumstances and make appropriate decisions. And that's what we did in that case. And again, he was qualified for the position and he was hired by my office.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Judge Jackson has been challenged on, and it may be something that you are addressing as well, is just the whole issue of recidivism and how
Yeah.
many folks that are released end up back in the prison system. And maybe there's an answer to why that happens. And maybe that's what you're working on right now. But how would you address
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only are we reviewing sentences, but we are working on this issue of recidivism by working with people who are in prison. We have a program now called the Emerging Adult Program. So it is for individuals who are ages 18 through 26 when they committed their offense. We know that this age group commits the most violent offenses in our community. So a lot of the armed carjackings, armed robberies, assaults are committed by people in this age group. What science tells us is that people in this age group, while they are legally adults, physiologically, biologically, emotionally, they are still adolescents. So they're still growing, developing, maturing. The brain is still growing. The prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of the brain to develop, does not develop, as science tells us, until an individual is in their 20s, their mid-20s. And so what we're seeing are a lot of people who have access to weapons. They have freedom because they are considered legally adults, and a lot of time on their hands. And many of them are undereducated. they are underskilled, so they don't have the ability to readily gain employment, and they're turning to a life of crime. And it is most unfortunate. But for the most part, these individuals, even if they are convicted, which we have a very high conviction rate here for those individuals who commit those serious offenses, even if they're convicted and sentenced, they are at some point returning home. That we know. And it is how they return back to us that will determine how safe our communities are and how well they do. And so our program is designed to assist those who are in prison serving time, because I believe in accountability. I believe in getting justice for victims. I believe in public safety, and I believe in accountability. But I also believe in rehabilitation. And so we have to invest on the front end, certainly to prevent crime, but also when those people do commit offenses, we also have to invest in restoring them and helping them to become restored. And so we have a program where we work with nonprofits. It's a virtual program because of COVID. We started during the shutdown. So it's a virtual program where we virtually go into jails and prisons all across the state, because they're where Prince Georgians are housed. And we do character development. We expose them to different professions and professionals in those fields. We are also assigning them mentors as they transition out of prison, so they have someone who will be their advocate, who can assist them in making that transition. This is such a great program. We had our first pilot class. About 7 people graduated. This class that we're starting in a few weeks will have 30 individuals. My goal is to grow that to over 100 per year.
And it's housed where? Where is it housed?
So it's housed out of my office, but it's virtual.
Okay.
Because of COVID. It was virtual.
Okay.
And so that platform works because we have individuals who are in the program from jails or really prisons across our state. And so if we limited it to one facility, then we would limit who would have access to it. So, COVID taught us a lot. We can do some things virtually, and it's been very, very powerful. So maybe Miss Barnes, you can come and talk to our class at some point, because I think, we want to expose them to all different types of fields, and certainly writing and the press and journalism is so important. And people who have gone through the experience of being in jail or prison, I think, can bring a unique perspective in telling the stories of those who are in the criminal justice system. So we want them to not limit themselves on what they can do in the future, and we want to help them transition back in our community safely.
Exactly. Makes sense. Actually, I have a little mentee, I think, who met you through one of those programs. He had a lot to say about it through that program. I don't know if he's engaged. I have to find out, but we want to make sure that happens. But you're planning to host an event next month in honor of Judge Jackson. You want to tell us a little bit about that before we sign off?
Absolutely. Well, we are going to have our monthly community in the courthouse. And by that time, Judge Jackson will be Justice Jackson. We believe that she will be confirmed by that time. So it'll be the last Tuesday in April from 6 to 8 p.m. It'll be a virtual event. So we will send around a link for anyone who would like to join us. But we're going to talk about this historic moment, what it means for the court, what it means for the country, and also what to expect in those issues that we believe she's going to have to tackle as the newest justice on the Supreme Court. So we hope that everyone tunes in. It should be a very powerful program.
Looking forward to it. State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy, thank you so much for being with us today. The door is always open. And a lot more I would like to talk to you about, but we'll schedule that for another time. And
I look forward to it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to segue actually now and bring in Austin Cooper, who is the managing editor of our House series, what the Washington Informer has been working on. And Austin, how are you?
Fine. How are you? Good to see you, Denise.
Likewise. And we're also going to bring on the Priestleys, Cassius and Jacqueline Priestley. Welcome to WIN TV.
Hi, Denise. Hi, Austin.
Hey there, how are you?
All right, thanks for having us.
Oh, I would say it's a pleasure, but it's a pleasure to meet you. But when we talk about this issue of housing, and actually we should be praising you all for being advocates in a field where we know that what Black homeowners are going through as it relates to appraisals, and what you all are doing to speak on behalf of them is good, but it's unfortunate that we're still here in this place. Austin, I'm going to really turn it over to you right now and see if you can talk about, begin our conversation about the White House meeting earlier this week and the fact that the Priestley's were participating in that meeting.
Well, thank you, Denise, and hello, Cassius and Jackie. Good to have you on the program. So I'd like to start out with how you all were invited, became a part of this process at the White House. I believe it was on Wednesday, correct?
That is correct. So we had a home appraisal done last year, so 2022, and we challenged our appraisal. There was some coverage around it, and the HUD task force, the PAVE task force, had heard about our situation and asked us to come and share our story as they released the action plan from the Biden-Harris administration.
Austin, I think you're muted. Okay. So yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Denise.
We're going ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. So, we've looked at redlining. I know that the White House has come up with an initiative. Secretary was there as well to talk with you all about how we address this whole issue of unfair appraisals. You all had a situation, as you said, when your house was appraised for one amount and neighbor's house was appraised for $1 million more. And we're seeing this happen all over the country. Do you think that this initiative that the White House has instituted and President Biden's commitment to making a change is what kind of work needs to be done? And are people communicating enough about the challenges that they're facing?
I think you point out something. I think it's interesting because I think in the Black community, I think the situations vary. In some communities where you have more of a mixed community, you can do what they call obviously whitewashing your home, and that may help to increase the value. But in our case, being in Prince George's County, we're in a predominantly African American community. So the assumption is that it's African American. If you're there, then your neighbors are as well. So the option of whitewashing our home was not an option. What happened for us was there's a distinct difference between our costs. So we had a home built, we lived in Prince George's County prior. We made a conscious decision to continue to live in Prince George's County. We looked at some of the neighboring counties in Montgomery County, Fairfax County, and others. And it just felt right to us. This is an area that, our kids live. They have friends in the area. And it's something too, I think kids at times growing up in an environment around people that look like them. And that was important to us, having three young boys. And so we decided to double down on the county and build our second home in the county. And the why behind we built the second home, we needed more space. We needed a home that can accommodate multi-generation. So we did just that. And what was interesting during the appraisal process, going in, you heard the rumors about homes in Prince George's County. They don't appraise comparable to homes in surrounding counties. So we knew that going in. But what was interesting and challenging was the disparity in the value of our home compared to what we thought it was. And obviously that was greater and exacerbated when you look at the disparity to the exact same home built in Montgomery County by the exact same builder, essentially sold for $1 million more than what I was appraised for. And that disparity just shouldn't happen. And so
Cassius, how did you discover that? Where did you, at what point did you say something's wrong here and let me check? I know you all have backgrounds in banking and PR, so you're not like the average person who's getting an appraisal. but something for you to do your research, and what was it?
No, Denise, I'll say this, that throughout our process of deciding where do we go next in terms of our family, in terms of moving, and how do we approach it, our decisions were always rooted in biblical principles, in terms of how we, spend our money, in terms of how we decide what's most important. And I really have to say that we really were guided through our whole process. In that we are not the most savviest of consumers, right? We are informed because of the work that we do, but at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know, right?
Right.
So we always were able to go through this process with a sense of calm and confidence, and things would be revealed to us. In terms of understanding the realization of the sale price of that other home, it's simply because it was listed and it sold, and we could do a Google search and we saw it we saw what the sales price was for that home. And it was infuriating to know that a house that was built by the exact same builder, less than 20 miles from us, sold for $1 million more than our house would appraised for. And your question about the Biden administration and this PAVE task force and their action plan, I think it's a huge step towards addressing a long-standing systemic and structural problem that has, in many respects, gone unnoticed or unaddressed. So appraisal bias is one of the many issues that are tied to inequitable housing practices in the U.S. But to really hone in on what the aspects are that can be addressed was monumental. I mean, the administration, really led by Secretary Fudge from HUD, maps out point by point what the administration is going to do, and it tackles everything from expanding the workforce of appraisers. There's only 2% of all appraisers in the U.S. are Black. 2% of all appraisers. And the problem with that is that typically in that field, you get into the business through an apprenticeship. And so if you don't have someone who looks like you to groom you and to create a pathway for you to become an appraiser, it's going to remain largely white as it is. And so the fact that the administration was so thoughtful, for example, in understanding that that is an important pathway that they have to create for appraisers, for example, was huge. But not only that, regulatory standpoint, from the algorithms that are used.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I hate to cut you off, but I want to. What does that mean when you talk about algorithmic bias? Explain that to our viewers.
Sure. So if our home value was suppressed from the beginning, if historically Black-owned homes have been suppressed in value, and you use data to determine the value of a Black-owned home, you're using false data. So the basic premise of your approach is flawed from the very beginning, because of historical redlining, right? And so they have to correct the algorithms to factor in those human flaws that have skewed the value of Black-owned homes.
Amazing. So, where are you now? What has happened, with the appraisal process? I know you were able to sell your other home, but tell me where you are in this process and what your movement is doing now that personally impacted you.
We had an appraisal. One of the challenges of the appraisal, it increased to $100,000. It was still $400,000 less than the cost to build our home. And that really inspired myself. You mentioned my neighbors at the start, Denise, and I want to just clarify, all of us had suppressed appraisals here. So in my neighborhood, everyone's appraisal was capped at the same amount, and yet our homes are not similar other than the fact that they have bedrooms and bathrooms and we share a street. And so that led us to say, we are going to break down the issues, the barriers and the opportunities. And we want to do it so we arm consumers with information on how to protect themselves, how to be their own advocates. We want to bring attention to this because while, this happens all over the country, in the greater Washington area, we have a high minority population, a high Black population. In Prince George's County, more than 79% of all residents are of minority race, meaning non-white. 61% of the residents here are African American and Black. So This hits us differently in the greater Washington area, and this hits us especially hard here in Prince George's County. And so we've done great work to kind of understand how we can help consumers, how we can bring this to the attention of the Maryland General Assembly, the role that we can have as consumers in working with HUD, for example. But more than anything, being an advocate, like I always say, if you were 20 years old and you were trying to buy $100,000 house or $200,000 house in this market, quite frankly.
I was about to say, do they exist anymore? But go ahead.
Where?
Home in 1990 something here, but and if your home isn't appraised for the sale price, you're going to either have to bring the cash or make a different decision about where to live, and likely pay more for that home because you had to make that tough decision to live where you don't even, that wasn't your first choice. And so our work through the Fair and Unbiased Appraisal Advocates is to ensure that every home owner and home seller knows their rights, knows their resources, know the work that's being done, and to remove this stagnation of action. Like, we can't just know something's a problem and not deal with it. If you know it's a problem, we all can do something to fix it.
We want to put up the website for the organization that you created as a resource for people who have more questions. Yes, blackhomesmatter.org. That's fantastic. And what are you going to ask the Maryland General Assembly to do? Have you already talked to them? What kind of policy changes are you expecting them to enforce?
Well, a few months ago, there was a meeting across the General Assembly with other stakeholders across the state to talk about this issue. And that prompted our delegate here, Marvin Holmes, to introduce a bill that would look to create a task force in the state, much like the PAID task force, the interagency task force on the federal level. And so that bill was introduced about 2 weeks ago, I think, and it was voted in favor of as early, I think, on Sunday. And that's step one from a state legislative level, is to convene homeowners, legislators, realtors, appraisers, and others to understand like how PAID look at it from a national landscape. Let's look at this from a statewide landscape to then say these are the actions that need to be taken.
Wonderful. Austin?
Yeah, just 2 questions. It's one thing, Cassius and Jackie, to read about this, to see it on, news reports, but it's another thing to experience this. How has this impacted you both professionally and personally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess when you look at it, how does it impact you? Really, it impacted us in a way to take action. I give a lot of credit to my wife. My first course of action was to try and right the wrong as it pertained to us, right? How do I go out in the marketplace and try and pull comparables? How do I connect with a realtor? How do I ensure that the appraisal I received, I kind of review it thoroughly to ensure they didn't leave out the bedroom, they have the square footage correctly. So my first effort was to make sure I tried to right the wrongs pertaining to me. But as we talked to others, my wife got behind it and realized that this is something that's prevalent, particular amongst our neighbors, but then outside of that. So you say, how has it affected us? It's kind of affected us to the extent of you kind of have some adrenaline and momentum to try and change it, right? And try and fix it. And so that's probably the biggest motivation for us, is try and correct the wrong, because you think about the amount of wealth that's lost in African-American communities because the home values have been depressed as far as their value. When you start to think about that, the number of new businesses that could have been started. You think about the number of folks that could have funded their education. You think about just household expenses, being able to care for a loved one, the amount of resources that have been lost, that hadn't been passed on from one generation to the next because of the homes being devalued, kind of makes you want to take action, quite frankly.
Thank you. And just one final question I'd like to ask. I asked of all our folks that I'm a part of interviewing. How do you define generational wealth, and how does your definition differ from that of your parents?
Yeah, that's a really good question, something my wife actually often talk about. I think generational wealth is it's inherent in the word generational wealth, is that you can pass on from one generation to the next. Now, I always say there's monetary wealth, right? With value of assets, and there's also lessons that I think is of greater value. So I extended beyond generational wealth around resources, leaving homes to someone, leaving stock to someone, leaving resources to hopefully make the path a lot smoother for the next generation from a financial perspective. But I also think it extends to knowledge, understanding your rights, everything from a work ethic. So I mean, it extends beyond that. But in most contexts, people look at it from generational wealth is that, hey, when you work, you're not just working for you and your my wife and necessarily my kids, but maybe my kids' kids, to put them perhaps on a higher platform to succeed and then pass on to the next generation.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's really great. We're going to keep up with what you all are doing, particularly in the state of Maryland, because this is really important. And we would ask people if they are having some issues. I mean, would they be able to go to the website, Jacqueline, and just find information? Can they call? Can they, what would you have folks that are having issues similar to this? And there's so many more, but how do they reach out to you?
Absolutely. Our website is blackhomesmatter.org. And on the website, we have tips for consumers before they get an appraisal, as it's happening, and what they can do after. So we want to provide information on all fronts. We're going to also add information to the website related to the PAVE initiative and the action plan. It's comprehensive, and it's a resource that I think that anyone who's involved in home sales, home ownership, appraisals, it doesn't matter what, we all have a stake in this, right? And so we're going to add additional information so that everyone can be informed, because at the end of the day, we say Black homes matter.
And I think it'll be interesting on our part to follow the path to becoming an appraiser. What that looks like and why, what have been the barriers, and what are the opportunities for people that want to pursue that form. And we've got a lot of people out there trying to sell real estate, but there are other jobs in between, right, that we don't necessarily look at. And so hopefully if there is any legislation or anything that needs to be done as relates to that, or just finding where those opportunities are and steering people that way is part of the role that we'd like to be a part of. So we'll be following up on that as well. But we thank you all for your time, for your commitment, and for the information that you provided. And this is a struggle that we have been dealing with since forever. So thanks for picking up the mantle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay, have a good one. Thank you. Austin, thank you very much. Before we go, I know we've been doing this series, Our House DC, and we're looking at what it takes. We've kind of focused primarily on Black home ownership in wards 7 and 8, but we have had some stories that really went beyond that point, which is what Our House DC will be doing, is looking at all the issues that impact the ability for Blacks to own homes and to stay in their homes. But you want to talk about what what next week's newsletter will contain?
Yeah, well, thank you, Denise, and I'll be brief. On March 9th, the Washington Informer, in conjunction with the DC Office of Tax, Revenue and Assessments, did a program on a community conversation on property taxes and assessments. I'm pleased to say we had 70 individuals who participated, and our next issue of Our House DC will come out on Monday, and we will go into detail about that conversation. And upcoming stories include 7 months after being displaced on Talbot Street. Where are they now? That will be a follow-up story. That is a story that we did in September. We're going to be doing a story on homeowner lender disparities for Blacks in the district, and defining and building generational wealth. All
right. And we may even look at that topic that you asked, or the Priestley's talked about earlier. If you're 20 years old and trying to buy a home, or 25 or 30 years old trying to buy a home, and finding something that's affordable not only in the district now, but DC, Maryland, and Virginia is a real challenge. So we may look at some of those millennial homeowners and find out how they've been able to get their piece of the rock despite all the odds. So looking forward to what we're going to do. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All righty. So that's it for this edition of Win TV. We're going to let you go right now, and hopefully, well, we're not going to let you go because we want you to stay on to watch the media prints with what's going on in DC. That's coming on right after this program ends. But we hope that you will join us next week, same place, same time. And if you have any thoughts about programs, individuals, anybody you think we need to have a conversation with here on Win TV, we are open to your suggestions. Email us here at news@washingtoninformer.com. That's news, N-E-W-S, @washingtoninformer.com. We look forward to having more great conversations and for information that you can share that will help to empower our community. So until next week, stay safe. Have a great weekend.
You already know why you're here. It's time yet another week of DMV greatness. Let's talk Rico Nasty, Omicron, Michael Jackson, and so much more. And huge thank you for all the love for our premiere back. So sit back and relax, and let's get on this DMV ride. We bring you culture and taste, art and entertainment. We bring you history and politics. And we got all things DC. I even got you covered, Maryland and Virginia. Welcome to What's Going On, DC. Let's start in news. An exotic palm-sized spider is coming to the DMV area, possibly this summer. It's called invasive Juro. Also, Omicron subvariant BA2 is coming our way, and health officials call it a variant of concern. It's called Steph. Omicron, because its genetic mutations could be different to tell if it's Delta or Stealth with a PCR test. Lord. Also, American Civil Liberties Union is demanding real marijuana legalization in Maryland. Here's the info if you want to join. According to the Washington Post and DMV Hoods and News, MGM and National Harbor may be getting a train very soon. Let's move to entertainment. Recording artist Young Manny with the message. DMV's own IDK pulls up to Simple City with Baller and jams out. Take a look. That's right. Love the energy, y'all. DMV's own Tressa Azarel partners with BET Her again to produce short films from Megan Good, Naturi Naughton, Tashina Arnold, and Lisa Ray. Give it up for Tressa. DMV's own Miles Frost is considered eligible for a Tony Award for Best Performance by an actor in a leading role for his performance as Michael Jackson. Hey, all right then, King. Lastly, Sweetie has her eyes on Rico Nasty for her next collaboration. She posted this on her Instagram story. Are you here for it? Cause I am. Shout out to the Neighborhood Talk for the pick, and make sure to check out the amazing entertainment website. It's created and owned by DMV's own Count Efferty. Now let's move on to what's happening in our cities. Did you know DMV's own DJ Quicksilver has his own DJ school called Quick and Easy's DJs? It's dedicated to cultivating the next league of amazing DJs. Take a look at some of the picks and register ASAP at quickandeasydjs.com. The fish market located in Clinton, Maryland is now on the market for sale. DC voted #1 in the top 10 cities with the most attractive Black women. On Tuesday, Amazon announced they are working on creating affordable homes near 4 public transit sites. So Under Armour and Morgan State University joined forces to create an iconic movement called The Makers, whose message is to be seen, be heard, be celebrated. Just be. Now take a look at the epic concept that goes along with it.
This collection was 100% created by Black teammates here at UA. We wanted to just take a chance to do something truly authentic.
We wanted it to stand for visibility. That's why the slogan is be seen, be heard, be celebrated.
We wanted to do something that broke away from the norm of what you would expect.
Black people are many shades of color. So we wanted purples, we wanted magentas, we wanted teals, we wanted yellows.
The colors are very vibrant. It's definitely a show-stopping shoe.
We wanted the messaging to be loud and proud. We have it all throughout this print.
We actually met with the Black employees of this company and asked, what do we want to say?
You've got the We Are the Culture and the Worldwide Aspiration Black Liberation. And then you've got Be Celebrated.
I feel like it's an awesome opportunity for us to be able to see the highlights of the celebration of Black individuals. So in the future, whatever it is, will be Black excellence.
And this weekend, get excited. The museum is launching not one, but 2 new shoes with the Curry brand. Take a look at the dope promo.
Thank my museum family. You know, y'all mean a lot to me, man. And I come to you all with some bad news, but some good news.
I've been hearing the rumors, or what I thought was a rumor. You know, I thought me and my man went back like peanut butter and jelly, like ham and burger. But I see our bond wasn't that strong.
I sat down, talked it over with my family. It's best that I go solo. So I'm gonna step away. I'm gonna take half of the store, the M, the U, and the S. I'm gonna take it with me.
My former partner is basically saying he's tired of this and he wanna do his own thing, like he's some type of solo act.
Don't feel bad though, because it's been some successful solo artists. You got Bobby Brown, you got David Ruffin. I mean, the sky's the limit.
I've had it up the head. Well, maybe up the head with him, you know what I'm saying?
And then, you know, that partner guy, the other one, y'all know he can have the rest of it.
Keep in mind, this ain't no east or west thing, no southeast and northwest thing, no uptown thing. It's about loyalty.
So, you know, I got a shoe dropping this March 26th on a Saturday at 10 a.m. I want you all to rock with me.
On the 26th, if you with me, you know what to do.
If you want to be with somebody that's a good leader, that stands out in front of the brand, willing to die for it, rock with me on the 26th.
You know who to support. Get my shoe. That's it. That's all.
All right, M-U-F.
Well, folks, we reached the end of the road. I'll see you next week. Peace.